Welcome back to the Business of Biotech. I'm your host, Ben Comer, Chief Editor at Life Science Leader, and today I'm speaking with Dan Schmitt, President and CEO at Actuate Therapeutics, a clinical stage biotech focused on developing elraglusib, a GSK3 inhibitor for cancer. That's glycogen synthase kinase, not GlaxoSmithKline. Dan joined Actuate in 2015 and has led the company since then through an IPO in 2024 and is now entering late stage trials. I'm excited to hear from Dan about his leadership experiences with Actuate over the last 10 years, including being a first-time CEO and how he managed to continue elraglusib's various development programs and maintain a runway during a really difficult stretch for biotech. We'll also talk about efficient company operations and get some specific examples from Dan about ways to lower costs. We'll talk about working with API and CDMO partners and his key priorities for the future. Thanks so much for being here, Dan.
Ben, thank you for your attention and the time, and I appreciate the audience's attention as well. It's good to be here.
We're glad to have you. And as we do on the Business of Biotech, I want to start out with a little bit on your background. I wonder what you could tell us about your prior industry experiences before joining Actuate.
Yeah, so starting very early on, I'm a scientist by training. Actually going back further than that, my father was a veterinarian and I worked in his clinic starting at 8 years old. He had a very large practice and all the boys in my family worked the clinic. So we got steeped in sort of like all aspects of medicine, including, pharmaceutical distribution, because veterinarians have their own pharmacies, and at like 12 years old, I was running and stocking and filling prescriptions. So it sort of was, set the seed for a pathway into the position I'm in now. I started my professional career back in the late 80s at a company called Burroughs Wellcome. Now, it was an English company that had a large U.S. presence and was one of the forerunners in antiviral treatment in AIDS and in herpetic infections. And that's where I started my career, was working in new product planning and development and then market analytics, working in those franchises. When they were acquired by Glaxo, it became Glaxo Wellcome and then it evolved into GlaxoSmithKline. I was recruited to the Chicagoland area and started at Fujisawa, USA, which became Yamanouchi. And there I worked as the director of new product planning and business development. There's a pathway in my experience that's fraught with acquisitions. So there's a series of continually getting into companies that increase value and were largely acquired. So my last role in Big Pharma was director of global oncology franchise at a company called Searle, and then became Searle Pharmacia, which was acquired by Pfizer. At that point, my wife said, we're not moving anywhere. We have plenty of moving boxes with plenty of moving stickers that haven't been opened up. Let's stay here and set roots in Chicago. And so I started working in small cap and then startup. And it just so happens that during that tenure, I served as a external expert in pharma development to the local academic institutions. So Chicago has great research institutions, Northwestern, University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Chicago. And I was recruited along with some of my friends and colleagues to come in and review the research programs that were resident at these various institutions and advise leadership there on basically which ones were ready for spin out, which ones could use some institutional funding to get them to that point, and then which ones were promising but at the R01 stage, and then which ones should be further, supported very earlier stages. And so we would sit, at panels and have various researchers and professors present their programs and advise. And my role was from a development and a commercial aspect. And then there were others that were, toxicology. There were others that were efficacy in various disease backgrounds. And that gave me a window into the various research programs at these institutions. Northwestern actually recruited me in as an EIR. And as part of that, I made a deal with them that if there was anything ready for spin out, I got first dibs. And it just so happens there were two programs at this stage. These GSK3 beta inhibitors were one of them. And that's how we started Actuate, is that there was a set of compounds that were invented at UIC that were being evaluated at Northwestern in their Center for the Chemistry of Life Processes Institute. And they really showed exceptional promise at a very early stage. And so we built a company around them to spin them out. And that was the genesis of where we are now.
So you were at Northwestern prior to the formation of Actuate. What could you say about your experience working in academic medicine in that role? And were you sort of all the time waiting for an opportunity to get back into industry with a company, or were you kind of tempted to stick around? That you liked what you saw? How did you feel about the academic industry divide?
Well, I'm a long time industry person. This is my 38th year in drug development as a professional. The relationship with the academic institutions was sort of a avocation because I really like working with exceptionally brilliant people. And the opportunity at Northwestern just presented itself. I wasn't there. I came in and was recruited in as an entrepreneur in residence, but the idea was fully to take advantage of, help them prioritize things while looking for something to spin out. So I have the utmost respect for those, for research institutions doing the right work, and but it was always with an eye towards, let's find something and let's build around it.
So you landed on elraglusib. Maybe it wasn't called that just yet
No,
at the time.
yeah.
I probably probably not. But can you talk about how Actuate came together? What steps you kind of took to in-license the molecule and form the company?
Yeah, so at the time, there was an entire portfolio of molecules that were invented by medicinal chemists at University of Illinois Chicago, and the inventor was really focused on these compounds as potential improvements for the treatment of CNS disease. So the target GSK3 beta is a known active moiety both in Alzheimer's disease and in bipolar disorder. So lithium is a GSK3 inhibitor.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting. Okay.
But it's a very dirty compound. It's got a lot of off-target effects that, patients do not like. So he was looking to invent something that was more specific, more potent, and highly lipophilic, so it was more efficient getting across the blood-brain barrier. It just so happened that there was a postdoc that came down from Mayo to Northwestern with an interest in this target, but in oncology. And so the two institutions developed a cooperative research agreement. And UIC is literally down the block from Northwestern's medical school. And so they took the compounds, took them into the Center for Chemistry of Life Processes, and evaluated them in their tumor models and in vivo, in mouse models. And they turned out to be highly potent against some very refractory diseases, such as models of glioblastoma, triple negative breast cancer, mesothelioma, um, lung cancers. And it was that exceptionality in those very difficult to treat tumors that sort of caught my eye when I was coming in. And I spoke to the head of that institute, Andrew Mazer, and said, is this ready to go? And his advice was, yeah. And I think I might have investors who can come in as well. So he had a relationship with a group out of Texas that had started another company along with him. They were always asking him, if you find something else of this caliber, please come back to us. So he came, showed them the data and said, I have a CEO ready to go. And they came in with the funding, and we formed the company based on that coalition of science, finance, and executive prowess.
Now, did you have to go in front of those investors and kind of make a case for yourself as,
Oh yeah,
I'm the
yeah,
right CEO?
yeah,
How did you approach
exactly.
that?
Well, I have a long background in pharma development, very successfully. I have taken, I think I've taken a dozen products from preclinical to clinical. I've taken nine from clinical into registration. I've taken products from pre-registration, post-registration as a lead. I've taken products from $100 million revenue to $1 billion revenue as a lead. So and I've covered all aspects of new product planning, market analytics, business development, commercial development, and team and corporate development and management. So I sort of could cover all bases with a lot of experience and prowess. And I think that the package was very interesting for them. I had been in small cap and startups prior to Actuate, and brought those learnings as well of what to do and what not to do, and took them through a process of how we would build a company, how we would license the technology, and how we would take it forward into full development and hopefully registration.
And
So
given, yeah,
I think
sorry, go ahead.
no, I think that package was enough for them to get comfortable, and away we went.
And given that breadth of experience that you just mentioned, you were confident that you'd had enough experience to become CEO. That was, a decade ago now
Oh
at
yeah.
this point. And I wonder if I guess how different the CEO role has been based on, what you were thinking about in 2015 about what the role might be like.
Well, yeah, I think that starting a company is different than develop. There's the startup, there's the development, and then there's the running of a public company. So all, three major different phases in the lifestyle of a CEO. So starting the company was actually easier because we did have some financing, and I could put it through its paces. So for example, the first thing we did, a little bit of seed capital, $300,000. And the first thing I did was have a kilogram of the molecule synthesized, and then sent it all over the world, right? And what I didn't want to do is commit the sins of the past of others, where they found out that it really, really works, but only with this one analyst in this one lab,
Right.
right? So I just had 100 milligrams here and a gram there, sent to various research institutions who would be interested in it, to do two things. One, does it work in different hands? And two, does it work in the same histology or different histologies? And then compare that across the different results. And so what I was trying to do is start on that path of, let's kill this thing as soon as possible, right?
Fail
If
fast.
fail fast, because I didn't want to find out 10 years later that it doesn't work. So we sent it across as many labs as we could find, some of the top thought leaders in various institutions and various disease states, and the drug worked. Right, it replicated upon itself the promise of a very active compound.
Was that process so you have this kilogram of product that you've gotten
Yep.
made. You want to get it out to researchers to test it. They may or may not be familiar with it as a kind of CNS drug. Cancer is kind of a brand new indication. Was it difficult to find people to send it to and to experiment with? What was that process like?
Well, it's interesting that the answer is actually no, because Northwestern and Andrew and his colleagues are all highly regarded in the scientific community. So we leverage those networks and the scientific foundation on this particular target to get that interest and have them test it out. So it really was just a matter of identifying the right programs and the right investigators who would be interested in testing it. And it actually went rather seamlessly.
Excellent. And we're talking about elraglusib is the product candidate that we're talking about. You're developing it now for a few indications, I believe, with
Yep.
some other indications in planning. Can you talk a little bit about how you landed on pancreatic cancer for a kind of lead indication, if I'm correct in calling it that?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. So it just so happens if the postdoc that came down from Mayo, his previous advisor had an interest in this in pancreatic cancer, this particular target. And so there's been a lot of preclinical science developed on the mechanism of action in pancreatic cancer and the synergies with other standards of care in pancreatic cancer. So we initiated clinical development with a lot of this scientific background done. And we did a master protocol, is what it was called at the time, that allowed us to go from standard phase 1 development, which is when you bring a new agent into clinical development, you do a phase 1, which is monotherapy and dose escalation, and what you try to do in very, very end stage patients. Escalate the dose up until you hit a maximally tolerated dose. In that design, as soon as we escalated from dose level 3 to dose level 4, where we thought the therapeutic window would open, the drug would become effective based on our understanding from the animal models, we opened up an 8-arm, what we call basket trial.
Yeah.
And so we recruited over 170 patients across these 8 arms. All these, the 8 arms were 8 different standard of care chemotherapeutic regimens. So for example, one of those combinations was gemcitabine and Abraxane. So everybody recruited into that arm had to have been shown to be refractory, have failed Abraxane prior to coming in our trial. And then we recruited them in and re-challenged them with that very same regimen plus ELRA to see if ELRA could reverse that lack of that chemo resistance. And it showed that, yes, that we had, first of all, a very benign safety profile when combining with any of these 8 different standards of care. And 2, increased efficacy in patients who were previously refractory. So from those aspects, all 8 arms were eligible to go into phase 2 trials. Just so happens the critical mass of preclinical data, the mechanistic data, and the data we saw in these refractory patients, plus the fact that we felt comfortable taking our phase 2 into first-line patients based on the safety profile, sort of gave us the critical mass we needed to take that as our first phase 2 indication. Others are going to follow based on all that work that was done in that basket trial, but it just the ability to move forward into first-line treatment in those patients, I think, was the feather on the scale that said, okay, let's go here first. Now, everybody asks that same question because, pancreatic cancer is where historically drugs went to fail.
Right,
It's just very difficult histology to treat. But we have some pretty remarkable data in first-line patients with this combination.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago that the mechanism is, I think you said the mechanism is similar to lithium, which, there are known side effects like brain fog and maybe some others that are more serious that make many psychiatric patients stop taking the drug. What would you attribute to the kind of benign safety profile that you have with elraglusib, I guess, in comparison, and maybe because the target is different, the side effect profile is different. I don't know.
Right. I think that, all right, so lithium is, it's basically a metal, but, it hits a lot of different targets in the CNS that cause those untoward side effects. Elra and it's the other drugs in this portfolio were designed to be highly specific. So what we typically do is we call it a kinase screen. And so scientists are able to synthesize different profiles of kinases and then test the drug across all of them to see at which concentration you are inhibiting those particular targets. Just so happens that ELRA is highly specific for GSK. And then the next 4 kinases that are within that concentration zone are all oncogenic. It's FLT3, PIM, MINC, and MAP kinase. Then everything else in the kinase screen is a log or 2 higher in terms of, IC50. So when we put this drug into patients, we know that at the doses that we're giving them, we're primarily hitting GSK3 and some other oncogenic related kinases. And then, having a clean profile on other receptors. It's not preferential for those. So it really is an outcome of exceptional medicinal chemistry and I think a little bit of divine intervention. How's that?
Hey, we'll take that anytime we can get
Yeah,
it.
exactly. I think that it just shows that this is an exceptionally specific and potent drug. The fact that we were going after CNS disease and that the medicinal chemist focused on a backbone known to be, I'll use the words, highly lipophilic, which means it loves fat, right? So it's designed to be transported across tissue and get into the CNS, cross that blood-brain barrier. Well, it's that lipophilicity that assists this drug in terms of cell penetration. It gets across cell membranes readily. And in cancer, the compartment of interest in a cancer cell is in the nucleus. And so this drug transports easily across into the outer cell membrane and then into the nuclear compartment exceptionally. And so it's that combination of specificity and physical lipophilicity that really, I believe, is part and parcel to why it's such an effective agent.
You mentioned that pancreatic cancer has been something of a development graveyard. Can you describe though what the unmet need is in pancreatic cancer, and what the product's potential might be if it's approved either as a monotherapy or in combination?
Yeah, so I think historically, the last major advance in the treatment of pancreatic cancer came in the approval of gemcitabine in combination with Abraxane, which is, an albumin fused Taxol. Okay. So Gem Abraxane was approved in 2012. So, it's been 13 years since the last major approval or major advance in first line treatment of metastatic pancreatic cancer. FOLFIRINOX is a four-drug combination of chemotherapeutics. It's the other standard of care. Recently, Ipsen had their NAB irinotecan approved. Now, that's known as Onivide.
Hmm.
Like nab-Taxol, it's an albumin-fused irinotecan. So they've changed the standard from FOLFIRINOX to now Lyrifox, and it basically is swapping out regular irinotecan for nabirinitecan. The field is, I guess, somewhat divided on the benefit of that additional, that swap. Not a real measurable increase in overall survival, maybe an amelioration of some side effects, you know, but there's been really no major improvements in terms of survival for these patients in the last 13 years. A lot of shots on goal, not very many successes. I think the field is evolving as we speak. I think that it will continue to be a combination treatment uh, uh, field. This GSK inhibitor, elraglusib, certainly will have a place. There's RAS inhibitors that are being developed now uh, for treatment of pancreatic cancer that are promising. There's a MEK inhibitor program that is developing. We'll see how well that goes. So there's interest in new developments on the come. These have all been tested in second line therapy. They're just starting to be developed in first line therapy. But I think the KOLs, the people who know and are participating across all these trials, are telling that elraglusib will certainly have a place as a backbone therapy. It combines well with others. It also has a compensatory mechanism along with either RAS or MEK. So they downregulate certain pathways in these tumors, and those tumors can practice escape by evolving away from those pathways. Well, the GSK pathway is one of those compensatory pathways, and if we shut down both RAS and GSK or MEK and GSK, we expect to see even better outcomes than one or the other. So I see the field is still going in combination treatment, and I see that Elra would have a place there.
Yes, and we've already mentioned, you're looking at several potential indications, others potentially in the wings to start development at a later date. I want to ask kind of a more of a business question, which is, what, and you've just talked about the possibilities for combinations, which, opens up, a lot of different kinds of opportunities. But what can you say about, I guess, the pros and cons of a singular product focus for a biotech company? You know, versus, I don't know if you've ever considered kind of bringing in some additional molecules or additional products. It doesn't look like you have to date from what I can see, on the pipeline on the website, but what can you say about, I guess, a kind of single product focus, and the pros and cons, what are some of the risks associated with a single product approach?
Well, I think that again, obvious, right? If you yeah, if you fail fast and then you'd fail completely,
Right.
right? And you start over. I think that there's pluses and minuses on both ends. We've been able to advance this program through over 500 patients, um, and have spent little over $100 million doing that. You know, Having a broader portfolio of products certainly would expand, do risk mitigation, would bring a broader set of opportunities and a broader set of challenges and a broader set of financing requirements. So I think that being focused on this drug to where we are now and getting it into registration mode may actually expand that opportunity to bring follow-on compounds as we go forward. But right now, we're entirely focused on this is almost a pipeline in a molecule. So
Right.
that's that, and that's the way we're addressing it.
Actuate went public via an IPO in August of 2024. Can you describe, I guess, that experience, and kind of your thinking at the time?
Yeah, so I joke. I say everybody should do an IPO once. Nobody should be forced to do it twice.
Yeah.
Um, it is a great learning experience. I think that, we started seeing the remarkable responses in the phase two program in late 23 and knew that we were headed towards bigger and better things. And I'm sure you've been around. You understand that, maybe the 21 to 24, 25 period in biotech was extremely difficult.
Absolutely.
There were JP Morgans where you looked and every sad face you knew was a biotech CEO. Um, uh, so we tried to remain private as long as possible, have the best return for our shareholders as long as possible. But going into larger stage clinical development meant we really needed to go into the public forum to start, attracting that kind of funding. And it looked, the 2023 was an exceptionally challenging year for biotech. The beginning of 2024 it looked like there were some green shoots in terms of IPOs, particularly in the first quarter. And we started the process in, the February, March timeframe of that year. And by the time we got to the IPO and in the May, June timeframe, the market had just turned. I mean, everything started shutting down, cooling off. But we were already committed at the time. And so we just pushed forward and got the IPO done in August of 24. It was, it challenged the will of those participating, but we got it done. We got public, and now we're able to take advantage of the public markets. So I tell that's why I say everybody should do one once, and nobody should be forced to do it twice. But I think I'm in a much better position now, um, understanding capital markets, accessing the capital markets and understanding them. So it's made me a much more well-rounded leader for the company.
Yeah, and maybe following on that point, I want to talk about, efficiency and efficient operations. I wonder, did you have to take any specific actions like in terms of clinical strategy or pipeline, to keep moving forward amid, a very muted and restrained financial environment, let's call it. What kinds of decisions did you have to make, to keep the company going in this really challenging period?
Yeah, I think it's so. We've always operated the company an exceptionally efficient basis. Like I told you, we got into 500 patients and just about $100 million. And you think about going from zero to that type of clinical program. I like to kid that some of the bigger biotechs spend more on coffee cups than we do on total R&D, and we're moving faster and better. Um, we've kept the head count lean on FTEs internally. I've been very blessed that in my career, I've run across people who are exceptional in their capabilities, really understand how to get things done, and are a pleasure to work with, who I trust and who trust me. And so there are those people in your career you come across and you just hold on to. And that's what we've been able to build this company around. I also have an exceptional stable of best of breed consultants that we use on a as needed basis. And that helps us keep our costs in line, that we're not carrying, high rent on a headquarters. We're not carrying a lot of FTEs unnecessarily. Um, and we've been able to advance this um, on a highly efficient basis. When the markets became tight, we focused on those programs that we could advance quickly and to meaningful, inflection points, and look at others to put into the timeline at a time when we felt the funding would be able to come in. And so, you have to operate understanding what the opportunity set is and how to stage it so that you don't get ahead of yourself and have to put things on hold or go halfway with things and then have the money go sideways. So we understand how to do drug development. I think in the C-suite and in the V-suite, we have probably over 150 to 200 years experience, and we know how to work things in a small company that's different than a large company type approach.
Do you have a process, or do you consider, out licensing specific programs with this drug? Is that something that you've, looked at or continue to look at this point?
Well, I think that ultimately, um, it's not so much out licensing, but it would probably be more M&A focused.
Okay.
So what we wouldn't do is, and I call it splitting the baby, right? So having one company have these indications and have another company have these indications, that never really works out well because it's a single molecule, it's a single safety database.
Right.
You've got to live with the outcomes of the trial, not only efficacy wise, but safety wise, and that bleeds across all indications. I think that there's always a potential to look at maybe licensing a particular geography, so for example, Latin America or Asia Pacific, those are always opportunities. And my BD background allows me to sort of stage our discussions based on the development of the program. And, I've socialized this program as we started moving into the clinic so that I could, one, get the input from, large pharma about we like what you're doing. What we'd like to see is so you can understand where they're coming from and what would drive them to make the kind of deal that you would like to have. So I've been doing that for the past couple of years. Um, and then, building this program so that if we desire, I could build a company around this, right? So it gives me a better seat at the table for BD discussions where, Mr. Pharma really would like to have this in your hands, but you're going to have to make me a deal because I can do this otherwise for my investors. So,
Right.
it's a long-term game, but I think that it's very promising for Actuate.
You mentioned keeping a lean internal headcount. You also work with a number of consultants, it sounds kind of like at will or on a fractional basis or however you want
Right.
to call it, but they're not full-time employees, which means that you're relying pretty heavily on some partners, CDMOs or API providers. I wonder, and
Yeah.
you talked about your success in enrolling clinical trials. How do you think about, I guess, how do you get the most out of those relationships? If there's maybe there's something to be said about choosing, but how do you get the most out of those relationships, and what, if any, challenges have you faced in kind of outsourcing, a lot of that work?
Right. So I think that we've been very fortunate to have evaluated and selected some excellent providers. So, for example, our API is currently manufactured by Pharmaron. It's Chinese based, but they're onshoring manufacturing into the U.S. as we speak. So we're looking at transferring the API manufacturing into the U.S., but with Pharmaron and in pharma, Pharmaron is well known. Major players, Pfizer and others, have used
Absolutely.
them. So they're well known and have a great deal of experience and have been actually very good to work with. Um, for the final product manufacturing, we actually have two manufacturers in the U.S., which came in very helpful during the COVID era, because invariably one plant would be down or run out of materials such as glass vials or stoppers. So we had parallel tracks at University of Iowa Pharma and with LSNE, and we've um, evaluated and have run multiple batches at each that keep passing specs. So we're good that way. Um, we have selected what used to be Bend Biosciences for an oral tablet manufacturing process, and they've been excellent. So it's really exceptionally well run from the manufacturing standpoint on multiple fronts. Uh, Rich Kenley, who's our VP of manufacturing, is uh, a long time pharma veteran. He's brought in consultants under him that are also exceptionally experienced, and it's actually probably the the program that keeps me up at night the least. Right? I just don't. It's like clockwork. So we're very fortunate to have Rich and his team running that, and it gives me no angst whatsoever.
So you farmer on partner and AP in China there in the process of onshoring to the U.S. I'm kind of looking at the federal policy perspective from an outsider's view, and so I often wonder, and when I talk to company executives, I recently have been asking, how much of this is really felt versus is kind of headlines, and it is actually making a substantive impact on your business. I'm curious about the federal policy environment right now. We've been back and forth with various tariffs, with China and obviously many other countries as well. I mean, is that at this point impacting your business in any real way? Are you preparing for it to potentially impact your business, and so you'll be ready to kind of shift? Where does that stand? How do you think about that as CEO?
No, I think you have to be prepared for this. Um, is to not respond is it would be foolish, right? And so yeah, we are evaluating the onshoring of the API. Everything else is manufactured here in the U.S. So we have that plan being executed. Um, the tariffs haven't hit us because we're R&D based. We're not, and so that's not affecting our business. I imagine that by the time we are, sort of commercially focused, which will be, sort of in the 27 to 29 timeframe, I think the dust will settle a little bit more and the picture become a little bit clearer of what needs to be done. and we'll be prepared for it at that time. But right now, our response is okay. Let's look at the best way to onshore the API. Everything else is here.
Another recent change at the federal level at the FDA, Richard Pazder is becoming now the head of CDER. I think
Yep.
for now he's also still head of the Oncology Center of Excellence. Given that you're working in oncology, do you? Well, let me ask this: Are you? Will you file your drug? Are you working with CBER or CDER
No,
on elra?
we're a small molecule, so we are in cedar. Richard brings, a really solid background from an industry perspective. We think he would be great. His team actually put out a manuscript a few years ago called Irreconcilable Differences, the divorce between uh, PFS and OS in oncology clinical trials. So basically, progression-free survival and overall survival. And it was a review of a number of cancer drugs that had been approved on these surrogate endpoints that later showed no benefit in survival.
Right.
And then a review of some IO drug clinical trials that showed no benefit on progression-free, but significant benefit on overall. And the gist of this article is survival is the endpoint. Well, our cancer clinical trials are focused on survival. And so we welcome his perspective because it just so happens that's our perspective as well. I think he's very well respected. I think the challenges inside the FDA are environmental and are real, but I'm hopeful that he'll bring some calming of the waters as the head of CDER.
Yes, I don't think it's wrong to say that Pastor is probably one of the most beloved government officials working in the agency and has been for quite some time. Yeah, that's all to the good for him, kind of
Right.
elevating up to head of CDER. Um, we're coming up on the end of 2025. We've talked about this difficult period in terms of the financial situation for biotech. Are you seeing more of those green shoots now start to
Yeah,
pop up, Dan? I mean, are you expecting a better year for IPOs and deals next year? What do you think?
I think we're hopeful. I think the industry is hopeful right now. I mean, if you look at the XBI versus where it was 6 months ago, I think there's deals being done. There's acquisitions, uh, you know, regreening the environment a little bit. More generalists are coming into biotech investment. So there seems to be some momentum and trade wins pointing to the positive, um, and we're hoping that continues. So, and that's the way we're focused on it as well. We have momentum in our programs. We've got some key inflection points coming up, and we're working to take advantage of our progress and the market conditions at the same time. So, it's looking like a promising near-term future, and let's just hope that things continue that way.
We're coming up to the end of our time, but maybe we can just finish off following on what you've just said, Dan. Your key priorities right now. What are the development milestones or other key priorities that you're most focused on right now?
Well, so we have a number of opportunities in front of us. Our investigators will be presenting at ASCO GI, which is in January in San Francisco, on the sort of the final data of our randomized phase 2 trial in metastatic pancreatic cancer. We'll be meeting with the regulatory authorities, both EMA and FDA, at the end of the first quarter to discuss registration pathways and what's required and designing a registration a global registration study for pancreatic cancer. We'll be initiating oral treatment in patients in the first half. So we've done everything with an IV. We have an oral drug that has exceptional properties, and that will be going into the clinic in the first half. We have a Ewing's program for relapse refractory Ewing's sarcoma, and we're working with international groups to advance that to a registration study potentially by the end of the year. So oral will be going into primarily first into refractory metastatic melanoma, and could also be accompanied by metastatic colorectal and non-small cell lung cancer patients. So there's a lot of opportunity sets between us, from where we are till the end of next year, with a lot of inflection points coming, and a lot of positive momentum to support them. So it's going to be a busy year.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed speaking with you.
No, Ben, it was a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate your time.
We've been speaking with Dan Schmitt, President and CEO at Actuate Therapeutics. I'm Ben Comer, and you've just listened to the Business of Biotech. Find us and subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts, and be sure to check out new weekly videocasts of these conversations every Monday under the Business of Biotech tab at lifescienceleader.com. We'll see you next week, and thanks as always for listening.